afternoon. It's good to share some more about my adventures. I arrived in Germany in 1963 in the fall, and a number of things happened that were really significant to me. One of those was getting a letter from my mother who said, hey, don't you remember that your grandmother's family had come from Germany? I believe she said they came from Retham. Why don't you go there and see what you can find out about the Werre family? So I thought, well, some weekend I'll do that. So I took a train and went to Retham. It was Sunday afternoon. Nobody was anywhere. I couldn't see any people at all, but I heard people. It was a very small village, and it turned out they were all at a soccer field. It was a huge soccer event. So I wandered down there, and I asked somebody who happened to speak English, did they know if there was a Lutheran pastor in the group? And this person said, well, yeah, actually, right there. One of his children is playing in the game. So I walked up to him. Turned out he spoke English, and I introduced myself and said that our family had come from Rethem, Germany. Wondered if he had any recollection or any records on the Werre family, W-E-R-R-E. He was a young guy, and he said, that name doesn't ring a bell, but we actually would have a problem if you're looking for historical information on them, because our church burned down at the turn of the century, and all the records were wiped out. So if it was after the turn of the century, we would have some records, but if they left Germany before that, we have nothing. He said, are you sure you're in the right village? I said, well, I think so. Why do you ask? And he said, well, there's Rethem and there's Rethem. The only difference in the spelling is the ending letter, M or N. I was in M, Retham. So he said, I'll tell you what, why don't you take the risk and go to Rethem? Just check it out. So the next weekend I took a train and went to Rethem. It was a Sunday afternoon, and amazingly I ran into the same situation I had in Rethem. And that was everybody in the city was at a soccer field. But I did meet the Lutheran pastor. It was just one church in the town. And I did meet him. He was an older man. And I asked him the same question. Hey, do you know anything about the Werre family? He said, I don't recognize the name. But I'll tell you what, why don't you go to the cemetery that surrounds the church? It's an ancient cemetery. And just look at the gravestones. Maybe you can find something out doing that. So I did. I was by myself, and I'm walking through the graveyard. I probably looked for an hour at various gravestones. There was no Werre in the cemetery. But as I was looking, there were two young girls, they looked like high school age girls, that were walking along the fence of the cemetery, and I heard one of them say, I think he's American. And so I realized they spoke some English, so I walked over to the fence and I said, hey, I heard you mention you thought I was an American. Actually, I am. And they said, why are you in a cemetery? I said, well, I'm interested in finding out if our relatives who came from this community have any, obvious history here, like a gravestone. Oh, they said, well, could we help you look? And I said, absolutely. So they came in, and we probably looked for half an hour and pretty much covered the whole cemetery. After about a half an hour, one of the girls looked at the other and said, should we take him to the wise old woman? I kind of chuckled, and I said, well, who is the wise old woman? And they said, oh, she lives down the lane here in the forest. And it was kind of corny, the wise old woman who lives out in the forest, a path leading to it. I'm thinking all the German folk tales. Well, we did walk down the road, turned off the road, got on what looked like a gravel road, and then got off that onto a dirt path that led back into the forest. These are very mature trees. And sure enough, we came to a clearing, and here was a lovely little cottage. And we walked up to the door on the porch, and the girls knocked, and a lady came to the door, and the girls began to talk to her. And at some point, she looked at me, and in very American English said, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Oh, well, I'm interested in seeing if I can find out anything about a relative of mine that I believe came from this community in 1848. She said, "What was his name?" And I said, "Werre, Werre." And her face looked astonished. She said, "What was his first name?" And I said, "I think it was Frederick." She said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I think so." She said, "This is a most unusual coincidence. My mother is on the second floor. I just left her bedroom. She's dying of cancer. She had the family Bible, and she laid it on her chest and closed her eyes and said, 'Whatever happened to Frederick?'" And I said, "Does he have the name Werre?" She said, "Yes, Frederick Werre." And she said, "Would you excuse me? I must tell her about this." So she ran into the house. She was in there about 5 or 10 minutes and came back out. And she said, "I'm so sorry. I can't take you up there. She would love to talk to you. But please come in. I must hear why you're here. How did you find us?" So I told about the girls, and, well, actually, they'd already explained that, I'm pretty sure. But it turned out that the Frederick Werre that was in that family Bible was my great-great-grandfather. And he had left in 1848, I believe, during a time in Germany which was called the conscription. I guess young men were being conscripted to fight in a German war, and many left. They didn't want to fight. They deemed it an unnecessary war and fled to America. Well, this Frederick Werre indeed had fled to central Illinois. What was so interesting, we talked for a long, long time, and she had so many questions about what had happened to Frederick and what was the connection between myself and him and what was our family like. And then I said, "Well, you speak such good English. How do you explain that? You sound like an American." She said, "Well, I lived in America for many years." And then she told this story. It was heartrending. She had married a Jewish man in probably 1933. He was a physician, a very well-known physician in Germany. Actually, he was a professor at a medical school, as well as a practicing physician. But anyway, he was Jewish, and as the heat was turned up against the Jews in Nazi Germany, he was encouraged by friends and family members to get out. So he took himself, his wife, and they had 2 young sons, and they went to New York. And they got out safely, obviously. They arrived in New York and finally settled in New Jersey. Now, this guy is really well known. Apparently, he had written several medical textbooks and was highly lauded as a marvelous physician in Germany. So he gets into New Jersey and immediately found a storefront that he could rent and start his practice again. He put up a shingle and was open for business. People began to come to him. It was apparently a poor neighborhood. People began to come to his office. There were a lot of Germans living in the neighborhood, so there wasn't any language problem. And he was a practicing physician in America. But it wasn't long before a man came and said, "Do you have any credentials to practice medicine here? Like, do you have a permit from the city? You speak German, we understand, and you're from Germany. What medical school did you graduate from in America? He said, I didn't go to school in America. I don't need to. I'm a famous physician. I do not need to go to American University. And this man said, well, I represent the local city, and you're practicing medicine without a license. Unless you can provide that license, you must close up your operation. He said, I'm not closing up my operation. I am a German physician. I know what I'm doing. I'm very well known. Here's a list of books that I've written. Here are papers that I got from the university in Germany. This man said, well, I'm really sorry, but you have one day to get out. You must close up this operation. You must take down your sign. You cannot see any more patients. And he said, what do you mean? You can't make me do this. And he said, look, you don't speak very good English, and I don't speak any German, but I think you understand what I'm saying. You're done. Well, with that, the guy walked out, and he was forced to close down his office. But what happened was so tragic. He went home and told his wife. That's the lady that I had met on the porch. And said, they tell me I can't practice medicine. She said, well, of course you can't. You're not licensed in America to do that. But look, we can make it. I will go to work. You go to med school here in America. You get your degree. You get certified and so on. It's okay. It'll take time, but it's okay. And he said, I'll never do it. And out of great pride, he meant what he said. He said, I will wash dishes before I have to go to medical school in America. Well, it turned out that's exactly what he did. He started washing dishes in a little greasy spoon restaurant. And within just a few weeks, he died. I don't recall the cause of his death, but I'm sure there was a psychological aspect to it. He was just brokenhearted. But anyway, the woman, his wife, stayed in America until her two boys gone through high school and entered into university, and then she had come back to Germany. What was so neat is making that connection. I immediately wrote to my mom and her brother, who were very interested in family history. They carried on quite a correspondence with her about the Werre family. It's a very small world, isn't it? But most enjoyable to get to know it.